So I apologize. And then I lost the people that were on the Facebook, so hopefully we'll get them all back. So let me just set my preferences to not fall asleep.
Yes, I did last week.
Yeah, or Zoom,
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Lois, can you miss us? Yes, I would.
All right.
I did too, despite the fact that
I decided to walk, so it's a big.
I'm paranoid. Where am I? This is changing. Yeah, I middle why I don't mind. Yeah. It's been a long time.
So is the power.
No, that's actually my old brother.
Yeah, last week, so she was remembering it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's, a little different. path.
Sorry, I'm having a few technical difficulties here. Just give me a second here. I apologize.
Field.
Yeah, Shanksville.
Oh.
You're well. That's to a certain extent. It does. Yeah, it does. Oh, yeah, it's in the New York. There was a power. Priest at the day, like, just in Netflix, it's on the show right now. I would recommend it. It's tough to watch, because you're fast to listen to. You know, because some of them. Research is shown. That's why it's such a. If you think it's better.
Supposedly they organize.
Well, it's so. Was this in the cloud or something?
Yeah.
Oh, that's much. I just don't have the time.
All right, let's try this one more time. Share screen. Laudato Si. Share.
So how's everything going?
I like this one.
Okay, hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hopefully we're all working now. Hopefully you can hear me on the Facebook. Sorry, I lost you briefly. Having some technical difficulties this morning.
Saving grace of that is everybody does it. Always from time to time.
All right.
But don't apologize.
Good
Sometimes it's.
morning.
Sometimes.
And I don't know what's going on there. That's new, that screen is up there. That wasn't there last week. And I don't know why it's doing that. So I apologize for that. What's that?
No. It was not.
This was not happening last time.
Yeah. Okay, so feedback from the video right there.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today. Let's begin with a prayer. And we'll begin with a prayer that's actually in this Laudato Si document. So let us pray. Thanks, Sarah. I see you there. Thanks. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace your tenderness with all that you embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen.
Amen.
All right, let's see if we click it and that'll help. It does. It just doesn't like to be so static. All right, so today we're going to talk about Laudato Si. And first of all, let's do just a little review for what the encyclical is. I mislabeled it earlier. I called it an apostolic letter. It's not. It's an actual encyclical. So I think I just copied and pasted and didn't do properly. So what is an encyclical? Reminder, this is just review from last time. It's a letter addressed. And again, I apologize that picture is there. I don't know why it's there. Hey, you get to see a couple of me.
That's intentional.
Not really, no. So it's been addressed pretty much to everybody. So it used to be addressed kind of to the, just kind of to the bishops, and now it's really to everybody. What kind of authority do they have? Not exactly binding, but also not usually, just summarily dismissed. How do they get their names? Dear Lord. Let me try another solution here.
There it is. Oh.
Well, let me try another solution here. Let me see. It might not like this HDMI thing. It had no problem with it last week, but that's weird. Let's see if this will work. And maybe it's maybe it just likes to be plugged in, my computer. Come on, guy. Very sorry about this. Let's see this one, if you like this better. Let's try that. Okay, so that gets their names from the first couple words of the document. How are they organized? They're organized by paragraph numbers. And then I wish I still had my mouse, but I don't have that yet. And the best place to read them is on the Vatican website, vatican.va. They've got, of course, they've got books of this where you could get from the USCCB. It's a great way to read it in paper copy as well. But if you want to like pull it up like now and not get it from USCCB or Amazon or wherever, you can go up and everything is free there on the website. Archbishop Naumann is really good about sending us all the documents. So he sends it to all the priests for our reading. So all of us have hard copies of them as well. So he's been very good about making sure that we have all the latest. So Laudato Si, is it the crazy hippie, let's hug trees. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. I'm gonna see if I can get that into every single class. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. No, it is not. No, it is not. And I think that it's got kind of this impression that, oh, it's on the environment or whatever. And it's all about tree hugging and care for the earth and all these kinds of things. But it's really a lot broader than that for us to understand. So that's important piece. So I think some people here, oh, it's the environment one, and they just like, I don't have any time for that. Where are we talking about the real issues? He talks about the real issues. It's really beautiful. So the basic point is our shared home is falling into disrepair. And why is that? And what can be done? That's the basic point of Laudato Si. Our shared home is falling into disrepair. And so he wants to look at what are those root causes, and some of those things might be a little surprising as well of what those root causes are, but he wants to have a response to that. Gosh, I wish that screen wasn't there. But it says on many concrete questions, so this is paragraph 61. So if you jump in quite a bit here, it says, The church has no reason to offer a definitive opinion. She knows that the honest debate must be encouraged among experts while respecting divergent views. But we don't only take a frank look at the facts to see that our common home is falling into serious repair. And so I think the question has been asked, and the criticism can be asked, or has sometimes been said, what is the Pope doing talking about something that is really out of his lane, if you will? That's the criticism that has sometimes been put on this encyclical. And he is saying, hey, I live here too. Catholics live here too. We're all in this home together. And it should be obvious if we look at some of these things that there are some issues that need to be addressed. And so he is writing this to encourage those to take a serious look at those environmental concerns. I am not a camper. My priest friends tease me about that a little bit. They talk about going on camping or whatever. Father Ashmore likes to camp. I do not. But I am not really a camper. But I understand that when you go camping, one of the principles is you leave the spot the way that you went into it. So clean up all of your stuff. Or better, right? So you don't want anyone to know that you were there. That's the basic principle of camping. I think if we apply that then to our world as well, as we engage and interact with the world, they shouldn't know necessarily that we were there, leaving all of our junk there. That's the idea. And as we are using this earth, are we using it in a way that is respectful of the spot? It's not entirely the best analogy because, of course, we build beautiful things. We build buildings and all of those things. So they know that we are there. But leaving our mess and our junk, kind of clean up after yourself is the basic message here. So there is disrepair. I like that picture of that house kind of falling over. What can we do about it? And that's where it can be addressed. So the basics of Laudato Si, it is wish I could get closer. So it's 6 chapters. It's a lot longer than Lumen Fidei. In case if you had read it this week, it is noticeably longer. It is addressing the environmental issues from a Christian perspective. So it's as if the Pope hears all these things that are happening. There's these debates and these conferences and whatever. And he's taking these things and saying, how does the church respond to them? It's addressed as Pope St. John the 23rd, Pope John the 23rd, addressed Pacem in Terris, peace on earth. It was addressed to all people of goodwill. Similarly, this one is as well. It's not just addressed to bishops, it's addressed to all people, Christian, non-Christian, everyone who lives on this planet. I'm addressing this to you. That's the address. It's a much more practical, I put practical in quotes because it's hard to say that faith isn't practical, right? But it is more practical. It's kind of easier to jump into than Lumen Fidei as we talk about these really high concepts that Lumen Fidei talks about. Laudato Si is a lot more practical, if you will. It's not just about frogs and butterflies, right? But it's about how humanity fits in with creation. Apparently, on the release of Laudato Si, they put like these, they projected images of the planet and things on St. Peter's. It was a really beautiful display from what I understand. But again, that gets where it gets criticized. It's, oh, you just care about frogs and butterflies, but you don't care about human beings. But no, it's much more than just frogs and butterflies, although it is about frogs and butterflies. It is also about how humanity fits into creation and how it fits in with this world. All right, so here are some. Does anybody know how to fix this? Anybody know anything about Zoom to fix the screen? Because it's really kind of distracting.
I don't know. On my computer, I go up to the very right-hand corner. There's an invisible X sometimes, and I can exit out. I don't know if that's possible. It's,
Oh, yeah, close it, Jimmy. Close
Yeah.
that little window.
you can minimize it, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. use the minimum.
All right. Let me just let me try to do that. Stop share.
No, but-
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a way to fix it up.
But if I can get there, minimize, hide thumbnail.
Have the
Move
left-
that down way down
Oh,
here.
Yeah,
Let's see if that'll work.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's better. I hope my cable shows up quickly. Father Ashmore is bringing my power cable because I'm down to 27%. So, okay. So overall thoughts and themes. There, oh, just like magic. Here he is. Hello. Thank you. 27%. There we go. Enjoy.
You too.
Move forward without fear of this dying on me.
Oh, it's interesting. Make a miracle of being able to pull things out of the air like you guys are going anywhere. And yet,
It's true.
these kinds of things happen on this people.
It's true. Well, it's a little old school, but okay. So overall thoughts and themes here. It's easier to read than Lumen Fidei in one sense. I mean, it's still challenging to read in that it brings up very challenging thoughts, but it's a much more casual style, easier to kind of, okay, I get what he's saying. With Lumen Fidei, I felt, at least when I was reading it, it felt, what is he saying here exactly? It's a little bit clearer, I think, what he's saying. Even if you might disagree with him, it's clearer what he's saying.
Father?
Yes.
Is that because he wrote this primarily, or maybe Benedict wrote? I mean, do you think that's?
I do believe absolutely that's true. Yeah. So I think he's just got a more personal, casual style than Benedict has. He's more of a theological style. And I mean, high language. This is really down to earth. And when you're looking, I mean, some of the phrases, I'll see if I can pull out any of them. It's very casual language in many points. And I wonder, let me just check this out here too. Don't think I can get a little much better, but
Yeah, that's much better.
is it? It's consistently concerned with the poor. Remember, that's one of the main themes of Pope Francis's papacy, is his concern for the poor. And he is really seeing the environment from the perspective of the poor. Remember how much one of the beautiful things about Jorge Bergoglio, or whatever his name is, before he became Pope, he was very much engaged with the poor. He was legendary for taking public transportation. He was really with the poor, smell like the flock, all those kinds of things. Those are a theme of his papacy. And so he's looking at the environment, particularly from, and not just like the poor, let's think about the poor, but these are like his people that he knew and could see directly the impact. And it's like, this is hurting my friends. This is hurting the people that I know. So he was really very much connected with the poor. And so this is really written from that perspective as well, of acknowledging here are all these difficulties, here are all these problems, and these are real things, these are real effects and things that I have seen personally, especially in my time in Argentina. There are a few repeated phrases, and I think I'm missing a few, and so if anyone, again, there is so much. This is a big document. I was somewhat regretting trying to cover this whole thing in 1 hour, but there's a lot in here and I'm going to miss stuff. I'm not going to catch everything. And so if there are things that I miss, feel free to pipe in at times. But so phrases that he uses quite a bit are this idea of the throwaway culture. Everything is related and connected. This phrase he uses, technocratic paradigm. So that's pretty technical language. Technocratic paradigm he uses quite a bit. And this anthropocentrism. And a
Down to our level, right?
what?
But he brings it down to our level,
Yeah, right, right. Well, just that, I mean, those are some, I mean, there's sometimes you have to use those fancy words because there's no other way to, put it. But this idea of technology governs our lives, and it's all about technology. Here we are, right? Not that it's a bad thing, but that it governs everything that we do. Technocrat, like democracy, technocracy, that our authority is in technology. And this distorted sense of an anthropocentrism. Anthropology is the study of humanity, right? And so a distorted sense of that we are the center of everything, and therefore we can have dominion over everything and do whatever we want because we are the rulers of this earth or whatever. Taken in a bad interpretation of what Genesis is, which we'll get to in a second, and distorting it. That's the idea. So that's a word that he uses quite a bit, this anthropocentrism, a distorted sense of man at the center of the universe. But let's go, I thought that I was downloading the PDF of the document, but I wasn't. I was just downloading a discussion guide, which is very good. And if my computer would print, I would have printed up a copy of this, but I'm having trouble printing things off. But if we jump then to the end of the document, to 211, here are some practical steps that we can do, and I will jump to this at the end as well. But there are practical steps that he recommends that what can the everyday person do? Here are some things that we can do. And these are all, I mean, we think we've all heard these kinds of things. Recycle, reuse, use public transportation if possible, plant trees, all these kinds of things that we have heard for a long time about. These are these practical things. But he gives all these things a sense of how that all fits in. And it's not just, it has a purpose. It's not just do these things, and it's not just save the planet. It's God has given us this planet, and it is beautiful, and we are to be good stewards of that. So in this discussion guide, there are really particular practical steps that one can do. And then there are practical steps that you could do at a parish or school or work. And so that would be something that we should be considering as a parish. And how are we doing these things? We're working on a light project. Hopefully that'll happen soon, about replacing all of our lights with LED. One, our church is dark, and so it needs to be replaced, and so it'll help, but also use a lot less energy too. So it'll be conserving energy as well as brightening up the church. So there are some things, and we'll come back to this later at the end as well. Okay, so let's jump in. And again, I'm going to miss stuff. I can't cover every single thing that's in this document because there is so much. But this is the basic breakdown of what the document looks like. Starting with an introduction, kind of putting it in the context of where we have been already, and then what's going on in the world. And it's not until chapter 2 that he gets to the gospel of creation, which is an interesting move, and I'll get into that in a second. So basically at the beginning, he talks about putting the letter in the context of his immediate predecessors, because sometimes people again put this as if like, Pope Benedict, he was the strict one, and now we've got Francis, and he's the loving one, and right. And no, it's not. That's not a helpful dichotomy to look at, right? He's saying, look at where Pope John Paul II has done things. Look at where Benedict has done things. I'm going to take this now to the next level. They were already talking about the environment too. It's not like Pope Francis was the first one ever to talk about the environment, but he's the first one to write a full encyclical about that. A lot of these other popes have written in various documents about the need for care for our home, but there's never really been an encyclical synthesizing all of these thoughts and putting into Christian thought. So he references many quotes of Pope John Paul II and Benedict, as well as putting in the context of some of the other social documents of the church, like Rerum Novarum by Leo XIII and Centesimus Annus by John Paul II. And he's saying, I'm adding this now to the social teaching of the church. This is something that should be considered as we look at our involvement in the world and as a social dynamic. He also quotes a lot of St. Francis. Not surprisingly, that's how he starts off this encyclical Laudato Si, praise be to you, which is the phrase from St. Francis's canticle, where he talks about all creation giving praise to God. He says that the purpose of this letter, it's very, I wouldn't say doomsday necessarily, but there is an urgency. Someone has said he's kind of like sounding the alarm, sounding the bell for the world and for Catholics to say, hey, things are getting serious. We need to do something about this. And so there is a real urgency as he's writing this letter. This is happening. We've got to do something about this. So there's a much more urgency in comparison to the reflection on faith that we had in Lumen Fidei. This demands some action like right now. So, okay. And then chapter 1. Now, Brian, to your point last week, who wrote this? The criticism could possibly be in chapter 1 that some people might say against this document and might be a turnoff for some. It does sound a little bit like he copied and pasted stuff from the United Nations or whatever various things that you talk about, the environment or whatever. So who wrote this? Well, I think he did, and still comes from a Christian perspective, but it does sound a little bit like something that you might read in a secular venue. But that is intentional, because remember, this is written to the entire world. And had he started with creation, which is chapter 2, it might have been a turnoff to a lot of people that he's trying to reach. He's trying to reach the entire population of the planet. And had he started with Genesis, people might have said, this is just a Christian thing. It's not my concern. But he is trying to state the conditions of what he has heard and what he has heard in these various talks from around the world, the Paris, whatever things and whatever all these things. I'm not as up to date on international politics and all those things as others are. But he's saying, here are the concerns that we are seeing. And I'll just go through these fairly quickly. So he talks about pollution and climate change in 22. He also, to his credit, because there are those that, deny climate change or that say that there is, that the science is off or whatever. And to his credit, he also says that there is some debate, but he says a very solid consensus. He's not saying that everyone believes in this, but a very solid consensus, and that it is something to be considered, and that there is a lot of scientific evidence. And it's saying, if this is true, then we should do this. Now, some are saying that there's no climate change or whatever. Well, he's saying, okay, but a very solid consensus. He acknowledges there is a diversity of opinions or things on this, but he does acknowledge that. So I think that was a good move by Pope Francis as well, because he's trying to reach everybody, and people are all over the map on these kinds of things. Talks about the shortage of water, and that water is a right for everyone. He talks about the concern about it being privatized by businesses and denying other people the access. Again, he's coming from the perspective from the poor, right? And so if the poor can't afford water, that's a serious human rights violation, right? So he is concerned about the shortage of water. Talks about the loss of biodiversity, frogs and butterflies, right? What are those things? Are they mollusks or something that's invading our lakes and rivers here in Kansas, right? And so they're eating up all the other things or whatever. So there's some really concern about, as we live in a more global world and things are being transported from one thing to another, and then there is concern about the ecosystems being messed up the way that they're supposed to be. And so this lack of diversity, so we need to of biodiversity, we need to make sure that we are protecting those things, because if God made the world, this is the principle, right? If God made the world, he knows what he's doing. And these things need to live together and live in harmony for the beautiful world to be the way it's meant to be. And if we throw that off by our self-interests, there's going to be repercussions because these things have been designed to live in harmony. You can't just go in and remove species and say everything is going to be fine, right? And we know that with like bugs or whatever, and we have to be careful of those things because certain bugs are there for a certain purpose because they help eat the other bugs, which help do this. And so if we get too much messing with the ecosystem, there's going to be some serious ramifications. Talks about the social dimensions, the decline of the quality of human life, and the way that the cities are becoming congested and all these things, and there's all these other societal problems that are arising because of that, the drug trafficking, etc. So there is that problem with the social exclusion, etc. And then again, I'm just pulling out some of these phrases that I think are helpful for each other. I think this is really important and key. This idea that sorry, I'm walking away from the microphone, that the rich live in this world, what is that called? The ivory tower, that they don't have contact. And then they're making these decisions about let's be green or whatever. And then they might not really be helpful if they're not taking into account, okay, what are the real impacts and what are we really doing? And are we really making a difference? And so having these personal contacts with the poor, as he has authority to speak on this because he has spent his whole life being in contact with the poor. Remember, he didn't choose not to live in the Vatican mansion or whatever it was that he wanted to be there, and he would often, I don't know if he still does, but he was taking like public transport and stuff and walking and not. He really wants to be with the people. That's a big thing for him, because if he's not, then he loses contact. So all this global inequality is part of what's happening to our world. He does address population growth as well, and some critics have said that this is not a good thing to poo-poo, but of course, as Catholics, it stands in all of these connections with our world that we are against abortion, we are against controlling population or sterilization or all those kinds of things. So he says it is not. If we say that population growth is the problem, that's avoiding the issue, and it's really about the distribution of what we have and not about not welcoming people onto the planet, right? And so there is enough. The point is there's enough to go around. It's a lack of proper distribution. So don't blame it on population growth, he says. Many environmentalists will say we need to control the population. We have too many people. There are too many people on the planet. Some people in the United Nations say they're forecasting how many people are going to be born or whatever, and they say that we can't do this and the planet can't handle that. The planet can't sustain that. And Pope Francis dismisses that. He says, there is enough resources. We can do this. We just need to have better, proper use of those resources, which is very important. I was talking with somebody, a friend of mine, and was, kind of poo-pooed this whole thing about the environment, because that's when she hears environmental issues, she also hears, well, they just want to control population. And that I take personal offense at that, because we try to be open to life and all those kinds of things, and pro-life and welcoming people. And when I hear environmental concerns, I hear controlling the population. And Pope Francis says pretty specifically, no, that's not the issue. That's avoiding the issue. Now, he has some critics on that piece that say we need to control the population, and Pope Francis sticks his ground. He's sometimes criticized for not being, firm enough on pro-life issues, but he's pretty firm on those things too. But it fits into the bigger picture as well. So. Okay, so then chapter 1, some of the conclusions that he makes here is that he's a little distraught that there's not better progress being made in these things, and people aren't talking about these things. I think this phrase here at the bottom of 59 is beautiful. There's so much beauty in this document. But it says, this is the way human beings contrive to feed their self-destructive vices, trying not to see them, trying not to acknowledge them, delaying the important decisions, and pretending that nothing will happen. Profound. I mean, not just for the environment, but for everything. You can put any sin in there, right? Oh, it's not a problem. I don't see what's happening or whatever. It's self-destructive, trying not to see them, trying not to acknowledge them. There are lots of vices, and sins, and people try to keep hidden those things. We just had that gospel yesterday about everything that is hidden will come to the light. And we have this tendency to self-destruction. And then the destruction of the planet is that on a global scale, right? And so I think it's very much, he puts it into this idea of the human nature and that we are responsible because of who we are. And it's in many ways connected to sin and self-destruction. We have a great capacity and leaning towards self-destruction. That's the state of original sin, right? And concupiscence. We lean towards destruction. And when you put that on a global scale, you destroy everything around you. Take the example of an alcoholic or whatever, right? And an alcoholic will say, I'm only destroying my own life or whatever. And anyone that's ever lived with an alcoholic or whatever says, that's not the case. You are destroying everything around you, right? So if we think of that self-destructive behavior and put that on a global thing, you're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting everything around you. And if everybody's doing that, then you're destroying everything. So I think it's very profound there. Self-destruction. Okay, so that's chapter 1. Any thoughts, concerns? Okay, yes.
I have a college friend who says there's no such thing as a private action.
Yeah.
Which is
Right.
another way of interpreting what you just said.
Yep. Everything affects, as he says, everything is connected. So people think, even the most private sin, it is connected still. Yep. Okay. So it's only then in chapter 2 then that we jump into creation and how this fits in. And now we're putting in the story of the Bible. So he's not bringing that in first, he's bringing that in second, which I think is a great move that Pope Francis does. Okay. So it's talking about, I love this phrase. It's grounded in these 3 fundamental and closely intertwined relationships. We have our relationship with God, with our neighbor, and with the earth itself. So it goes to the story of creation, how we are connected with God, how we are connected with our neighbor. We have the story of Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve, and then with the earth itself, that we are called to cultivate the earth. He talks about how, I was mentioning a little bit earlier, the misconception of this idea of have dominion over the earth and how that has been used as justification to do whatever we want with the earth. And well, God gave it to us and we can do whatever. And he's giving a corrective to that we are called to care for the earth and be good stewards and be responsible for what we have been given. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but here it also says the Bible has no place for tyrannical anthropocentrism. There it is. Tyrannical anthropocentrism, unconcerned for other creatures. So we have this great relationship with others. I'm not going to go through the entire way he goes through creation. I can't cover everything, but I also like the way that he talks about Noah. And I hadn't really considered this before. The way he says it is quite lovely. All that it takes is one good person to restore hope. Again, very practical, down-to-earth language. Noah, he gave the humanity a chance of a new beginning. And so with Noah and his family, but he first talks to Noah saying, build this ark, and just one person can restore hope, and you have this new creation. It's a lovely way of thinking about that story of Noah.
Didn't work.
What?
Didn't work.
Well,
Delayed.
It was a nice idea.
still. So then some Christian terms and ideas he goes through in chapter 2. I like this distinction between what creation and nature is. Okay, so we believe that we come from the Creator, not just nature, frogs and butterflies, but that we have a Creator that who has created, and that is creation. It just didn't appear, but we have our origin in God. And this notion of demythologized nature. So some would say that, the earth is divine or whatever, or what is that phrase that there's like this earth, soul of the earth or something. I forget that word is, but that somehow the earth has this soul, this earth soul, or we are all God and we are all whatever. It's like, no, that's not the Christian idea. It's God is God. We are not God. Creation is not God, but it is the creation of God. And so we have demythologized nature. We don't see nature as divine. He also says, again, he says, as Christians, and we should know all this, but we can postulate this theory of evolution. It's well respected in the scientific circles. Sometimes people have this idea that if you're a Christian, you can't believe in evolution. That's hogwash. But he does say that humanity does still have a particular place and is particularly different. And each of us has its own personal identity and is capable of entering into dialogue. So humanity is unique in that idea that we can make changes. We are unique amongst all of creation. So even though we can subscribe to many aspects of what evolution teaches, humanity is still distinct and different. There is a major difference between us and the apes, even if there is very little DNA difference or whatever. We are still very distinct. There's a big jump there. I like that phrase. We are all called to lead all creation back to the Creator. And so by caring for the environment doesn't mean that we don't care for society. We care for the whole package. That's the idea. So Pope Francis is really putting this whole conversation with the environment in the broader picture of how this all fits in society. We live in a home that needs to be cared for. We all know this, I think, when we, just by how we live, that the environment in which we live makes a difference. Many people have done renovations on their homes or put more windows in their homes or whatever because they want more natural light. And they know if they have a place with natural light, that has an impact on how they feel, and that's good. And one of the reasons, besides being a good environmental choice to do the lighting change in the church, it also affects the environment, because sometimes when I come into the church, I look over there and I'm like, is it on full? Yes, it is. Boy, it's still dark in here. But the idea is that it has effect on me anyway. I know that where I am and where if there are lights on, or if it is cloudy for days and days and days, it drags me down. The place in which we live has an effect. And if we are living in a dump, right? Some people literally live in dumps. It brings everything down. And then that tends to, unless you have a good social worker working with you, then you tend to take that out in society, right? And you get aggressive and whatever, because you don't have a good balance in the environment in which you live. So it's all related. That's the point that he's saying. Where we live, if we live in a place that lifts up our spirits, it helps us to be better in society. If we're in a place that brings us down, we tend to lash out and bring it out in other places. It's all connected. So we need to bring everything up so that we can share in the beauty that God has intended for us. Okay. Chapter 3, I think that's the first time he introduces this phrase, the technocratic paradigm. And there are a lot of things I could have quoted on here. I can't quote everything. But this idea that human beings and material objects, they once really shared this beauty. They reached out these hands to one another. And now the relationship has become confrontational. It's like the environment versus humanity. And who's going to win? And there's this confrontation, and that's not the way it's intended. We are intended to be at harmony with our environment and not to be confrontational. I put it on the slide, but then I deleted it because it was just a huge long quote. But I read through this document twice, as I did with Lumen Fidei, and both times when I came to paragraph 109, I'm like, whoa, wow, blew my mind both times. So I didn't, I read it again when I was reading through it the second time, like, wow, that paragraph 109, is that the one I thought that blew my mind before? And yep, it was. I put a note in there. So it's a very powerful paragraph about finance and the economy, and it says some circles maintain that the current economics and technology will solve all economic environmental problems, and argue in popular and non-technical terms that the problems of global hunger and poverty will be resolved simply by market growth. They are less concerned with certain economic theories, which today scarcely anyone dares to defend. All those things. It's something to really ponder and consider. Profound stuff, I think. So paragraph 109, I just put a reference to that. And then we need to have this adequate anthropology, right? The study of humanity, who we are. We need to know who we are to have a proper ecology. Where did we come from? How are we created? And then we will have this renewal also of humanity. Renewal of ecology means renewal of humanity. These are not disconnected things. Everything is connected. Everything is related. Again, he does talk about the sanctity of life. This is an important issue as well. People say, why does the Pope talk about abortion or whatever? Well, he does, and you wouldn't expect it necessarily in here, but it connects, again, everything is connected to the throwaway culture. And then how can we possibly, if we generally teach think about things that are vulnerable, how are troublesome if we fail to protect the human embryo? What are we doing here? And then relativism, that we need these objective truths. If we just see that everything is relative and everything is about my own desires and satisfying my own desires, well then why wouldn't we have human trafficking and drug trade and blood diamonds and all these things? If all that matters is the bottom line, if all that matters is how much is being made, how much is being produced, if that's what matters, and we're talking about market growth and production and all these kinds of things, all these things that really got accelerated in the industrial age. But Pope Francis is saying, wait. Have we lost the vision of who we are as human beings? So he's trying to kind of put on the brakes a little bit here and say, have we lost respect of these greater goods? Because, before the industrial age, there was much more connection with someone in their work, in their trade. People didn't go into factories to be a cog and do these things. He's not saying those are all bad. It's just we need to have some sort of balance. If we're going to have this way of of living, we have to have a balance. We have to be connected to the work that we do and the responsibility that we have. You would feel much more responsibility when you're crafting a chair or whatever. And think of Joseph the carpenter. You have much more care in that work that you are doing because you have done this. And especially if you are living, very close to, you got to make ends meet. You're not wasting anything, right? So I've used this wood and now I need to keep this wood to make this. If you are going and you're part of this industrial product, it doesn't really matter to you because you're not connected. If the boss says you do this, and you're not connected to the final product, and it doesn't really matter to you, right? So he's saying, hey, let's consider here what we are doing, and there's a greater concern than simply how much product can we turn out and how much money can we make. We have lost in some respects the value of the human person, and we need to return to that. Goes into a bit of conversation about the cities and how those are built, and that again, he's always keeping in mind the poor, and does everyone have access to these things, and how are we constructing our cities? In some places, some people have access to green space and some people don't, and water and air and green. Everyone should have connection to the earth and to nature and the way that God has created the world, and not just stone and glass, right? Someone was commenting, sometimes people have trouble with Pope Francis's writings or documents or whatever. And someone was commenting on this priest group that I'm in. And he said, one thing is helpful for him to remember is that the Pope Francis does not generally write to the United States. We are not the target audience necessarily, right? And that's helpful for us to remember because we tend to think we're the center of the world, right? And everything should be about us and whatever. And so when we hear Pope Francis say some things, we're not necessarily the target audience, right? In some ways we are, but in some ways we're not, right? And so if we think of some of these, again, in his experience there in Argentina, and these mega cities, and he's living in these slums and whatever. And I think we have a little bit less, when we have poverty, at least in my experience, poverty in the United States is different than the poverty in many other countries, right? And so when someone is poor here, we have lots of access to various things, but some places really don't have those access to societal helps and whatever. And I love the writings of Mother Teresa. And when I went there to India, it was an amazing experience. And going to Calcutta, oh my goodness, it is not a place I really ever want to go back to. There are people everywhere and just everywhere because of the whole thing. Was it Bangladesh with the whole wars? I don't remember how that all works. And the flooded of people that came in. And I mean, and then we went out into the outskirts, and there were a lot of poor there as well. And I was like, oh, green space, it's so lovely. But I mean, there were people and cows going everywhere in Calcutta. And we don't necessarily have that experience here in the United States. When we think of the poor, we think of a different kind of poverty, I think, especially than Pope Francis has experienced. And so I think that's important for us to keep in mind. So yeah. Okay, I had that quote, sorry. Okay, chapter 4 talks about an integral ecology. One of the concepts, again, is he has this intergenerational solidarity, right? Because he only uses small words. Intergenerational solidarity. But we think of solidarity, and the principle of solidarity basically is that we are all in this together. That's the basic meaning of solidarity. But he expands that idea to intergenerational, that we are connected with our past and with our future. And, what are we leaving for our future generations? And do we care about them? And if we're just thinking about this immediate rewards and immediate profits without concern about how are we going to leave this planet, right? So this idea of the idea of the camping analogy, right? We come here and we make it not worse, hopefully better, but someone else is going to come onto that campsite. And if we've just trashed it, well, what are we leaving for the next people coming? So this idea of this intergenerational solidarity, and it's not optional, but he puts it in the language of justice, that we must do this out of justice for those who are coming here next. Again, it's just very practical language. We may well be leaving coming generations debris, desolation, and filth. That's very practical language. You know, we, or thinking of like a, you know, the analogy of a house party, you know, like a teenager or a college kid who parents go away for the weekend and invite all the friends over, and they go on a party and they don't care how they leave it. They leave beer bottles all over or whatever. Not that I've ever experienced that, but I've seen movies about that. But they leave them as a disaster, and then, well, someone's got to pick it up. Or I've also watched The Office a lot, and there's this scene where Michael, the boss, goes down into the warehouse and he's driving around the lifter, the loader, or whatever, and he knocks everything over. And he says, well, we'll get someone to clean it up. And the warehouse, we have to clean that up. We are the guys that have to clean that up. So I think of this also, we made a complete mess and someone's got to clean it up. And who's going to do that? Well, not my problem. So we have to be concerned about, if we do all these things, we have to make sure we clean up after ourselves. That's the basic point. So there's a lot of things that he goes through about, so how do we go forward? I can't cover everything, but he attacks the market quite a bit, and that's where some people have some objections, again, to this document. We need to reject this magical conception of the market. And just saying about, we're all about the maximization of profits. We've got to have other things that we consider. So he goes into quite a bit of detail about that. Again, although it is addressed to people of goodwill, there's only so much that we can do about that, right? So it's directed to people that, own businesses and have big international corporations, and he's calling upon those that are in positions of power to use that power. What was it Spider-Man said? With great power comes great responsibility. So if you have this power, use it responsibly. And so he's really calling upon people to not just think about maximizing the profits. And if that's going to be the case, then there have to be some international groups or things to have some consequences. If you do this, then there are consequences to those actions. And so he's really calling for some more international regulations about these things, which again is meant with some objection that why are you regulating all those things? But we have international regulations on lots of things, about travel, about war, even about what's fair in war, what's not fair in war, what's fair in trade, what's not fair in trade, all those kinds of things. He is trying to elevate all those things to consider. There are lots of these things that are important that need to be considered besides just the markets. Oh, where did you go? That's weird. The ending is very, very positive. It's not as meditative of a document, I wouldn't say, as Lumen Fidei, but there are lots of just real gems in here to consider for prayer. We lack awareness of our common origin, our mutual belonging. A great cultural, spiritual, and educational challenge stands before us, and we will set on this long path of renewal. And then, again, great things to consider when people become self-centered or self-enclosed, their greed increases. The emptier a person's heart is, the more he or she needs to buy, own, and consume. It's great, powerful things, right? That the emptier our heart is, the more our greed increases. And then we need to buy. Get more stuff to fill that emptiness of our heart. what was it that St. Augustine said? Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, right? And so we're trying to fill our hearts with these other things. This will make me happy. Oh, this will make me happy. Oh, this will make me happy. And they never do. And we very rarely learn. I'm as guilty as the next. I buy this. Oh, this will, oh, I need this game, or I need this, or I need this, whatever. I need this cup of coffee or whatever. I need, because that'll satisfy the loneliness and the emptiness in my heart. But the only thing that's going to fill that emptiness and that loneliness is God. And God does not exhaust. God continues to give. So great things for us to consider. And again, he's coming from this Christian perspective. He's staying in his lane. He's talking about what does this mean for the Christian? And this encourages this prophetic contemplative lifestyle, capable of deep enjoyment, free from obsession with consumption. Okay. We have this conviction that less is more. That's part of who we are as Christians. We do this in our Lenten practices. The various religious organizations of living poverty, chastity, and obedience, they give us that example. Not everyone is called to poverty in the way that maybe a Franciscan is called to poverty, but all of us are called to a simplicity of life. And all of us are called to live for others. Although we might have stuff and we might have needs, it's not just for our self-centered ends, it's for love. And he really talks quite a bit about love, about reaching out for others. It's not about our own gain, but for the good of others. If we are just self-centered, and this is all for my benefit, if everyone on the planet is doing that, well, we're in trouble. It's a call to love. That's really, come on, people now. And then a beautiful reflection on, again, staying in his lane, about the Christian Catholic perspective about the Eucharist and Sabbath rest and how those are important. Some other beautiful reflections. The Eucharist joins heaven and earth, and it embraces and penetrates all creation. So as Catholics, we celebrate the Eucharist, and we use the fruits of this earth, fruit of the earth and work of human hands, as we say in the Eucharistic prayer. And we use the bread, we use the wine. These things come from the earth. It's connected to creation. It's not just let's just think about God thing. It is, we are literally using the fruit of the earth, and it's really coming into us. So it's this uniting of creation, and we use that even in our sacraments. And then Father Ashmore did his final paper on, what was it? It was on relaxation, or about he's not here, but no, what do you call it when we I forget the word. But anyway, but we need to have rest. And we sometimes say, oh, that's not important, but we need to have that Sabbath rest. God created the world in 6 days. On the seventh day, he rested. And that day of rest then gives meaning to everything else that we do. And if we just work, we have lost the meaning of what we are doing. If we're not reflecting on what have I just done all week, well, then our work has no meaning. And so these Christian aspects of, we just don't work. We rest as well. Beautiful stuff. Okay, so then in summary, then what are the problems that we see? And I thought of 4. I think I'm missing some. We have rampant consumerism, we have relativism, we have individualism, we have maximizing production as a top priority, and lack of relation to the environment. So what are the solutions? A simplicity of life, objective truth, we are all one family, responsible production, and seeing humanity as part of creation. If we could kind of summarize what is happening in Laudato Si, these are the calls to those things. In place of rampant consumerism, we have a simplicity of life. And in place of relativism, we have objective truth. Instead of just seeing that we are all just individuals, we see that we are all one family. Instead of just maximizing production as our top priority, we have responsible production. And that instead of lack of relation to the environment, we see humanity as a part of creation. So here are these, what I saw as kind of the 5 main issues. Here's how we respond. Again, what are those practical steps? So we talked about this at the beginning. Here are some steps that you can take at home. If you want to go to the bishop's website, search for Laudato Si. You should be able to pull those down as well. Find that at usccb.org. Here are some just practical steps of what we can do individually and what we can do as institutions. So that pretty much summarizes Laudato Si in about a little over an hour. They're talking about all those issues. Here's the upcoming schedule. Again, no session next week. I have a baptism, not here, but at Curie of Ars. And then, so take a break for a week and then 2 more sessions. Okay. So questions, comments? I'll get the mics. And I see you on Facebook. If you have any questions there, you can just type those in there. Thoughts, questions, comments?
When Pope's encyclicals are addressed to people of goodwill, does that leave anybody out? And otherwise, why wouldn't he just say to all people, because we are all children of God? Throughout this entire presentation and in other areas as well, I think in terms, it's easier for me to understand what's going on in the world if I think in terms of, okay, the devil is in charge. There's the devil's minions out there doing the killing and the raping and the causing of wars and wanting only profit, so on and so forth. And then there's the people of goodwill who live in love and try to love God and love our neighbor. Is that what he's saying, or is he saying all people?
He is saying all people, and I think the way he's saying, he used the phrase "people of goodwill." If you're not of goodwill, you're not going to read this anyway.
Correct. Well, then why bother to say it?
To give us hope and encouragement and direction.
Yeah. So another way to say it: anyone out there listening to me, here are these words. If you're not listening to me, you're not listening to me. So
sometimes people will read it and they're still not listening.
Right.
Which is the frustration.
Right.
In nature.
Yes.
It strikes me more than once that my conserving water and electricity is doing absolutely no good for those people that don't have it. I do it because it's the right thing to do, but that's beside the point. It does. If it, it's like when my mother used to tell me when I was small, clean your plate, there's people in India starving.
Right.
How is that going to help the people in India? You see, same principle, and I've struggled with those kinds of issues all my life.
No, that's true.
Increases awareness. There are hungry.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
Also gives you gratefulness. Be grateful for where I'm at in comparison to other people and